Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to quickly ask if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in getting the show in front of other listeners. If you listen on a platform that doesn't do reviews, please follow us on social media, like the show, or leave a comment. Thank you. We love you guys, and we hope you enjoy the show. You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katy.
Welcome back.
Welcome back for realsies, because we had a little break.
I know. I was going to say, it's been like 2 weeks since we've recorded. Mm-hmm. Because we're for real, and we don't record shit ahead of time.
Yeah.
Except at Christmas.
Yeah. We're basically live.
I know. I was listening to, and that's why we drink, which is what we were just talking about off mic. I was listening to their episode that came out today, Sunday, and they were recording it like 2 days before Christmas, and I was like, okay, well, y'all are better than us. I mean, obviously, but I was like, I don't even have 2 episodes written. I was like, I finished this one yesterday.
Well, I gave you a little reprieve because
I know
I had an episode.
I know. But to be fair, I made myself not work on anything over Christmas break,
Allowing yourself to actually have a break.
Yes,
which is totally needed and warranted. And
yes.
I also need a break because, it was Christmas and my dad was here. Mm-hmm. And so, and of course, obviously Walker was home with us and not at daycare all that week. And then we were at the cabin. So my house was kind of chaos because of Christmas and guests. Mm-hmm. And then we were at the cabin, and then we got home and it was New Year's and the house was still chaos, and I can't really deal with chaos and a toddler at the same time because he is an agent of chaos.
Oh, is he?
He really is. quite so. And then Walker finally, went back to school, and I was able to, in a mad dash, spend a couple of days getting, recovering some from the chaos, but then also trying to prep for another guest / Shelton's surgery because his mother-in-law's in to help out, and he had his gallbladder yanked out Friday, and everything went well with that, so that was a nice relief. But he's basically useless right now, and he probably will be for a few more days. But he's up and he's moving around. He's trying to do things. He wants to do things, and he's trying to help. And I'm like, please don't
stop.
No, go be useless. I'm encouraging. Now is the time to be useless. Let your body heal, and then another day or so, then start making it do things.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple announcements.
Bring it on.
Okay, the first one is I fired our social media person, which is me.
So I had to say, is it you or Jarek?
It's me, but then I also rehired myself on the condition that I will do better. I had a stern talking to because I realized that I have been really bad about posting our Instagram pictures on time, and my New Year's resolution is to fix that.
Nice. It's a good resolution.
I know. I acknowledge that I completely missed a post. I think it was the John Teeter episode. I think I completely missed that post, and there's no going back to it. So sorry, everyone. We're just starting fresh. Anyways, that was my first announcement. My second announcement is that you and me are going to be on another podcast. So it's called the HKL podcast, which stands for the Hard Knock Life.
That's all of my initials, just in the wrong order.
It stands for the Hunt Katy Langley
podcast. Hunt, Katy Langley.
Yeah, Hunt, So this is Aware's podcast. Aware is the clothing brand that we are partnering with that's local to us that raises awareness for mental health and suicide prevention and all that good stuff. So we are recording with them tomorrow. Fun fact, it is a YouTube podcast. So not only do Katie and I have to look presentable, we don't have to, but I think we're both going to try.
We kind of have to.
We're going to try to. But if you want to see our faces and our voices at the same time, you can check this out. So you can find it on YouTube or on their Facebook page. So on YouTube, you just search HKL Podcast, which I'm going to link that in the show notes. On Facebook, you can search Aware Clothing, and Aware is spelled A semicolon W-A-R-E. And then on Instagram, they're a.wear.clothing. And then their website is a-wearclothing.com. I just thought of another announcement that I need to make.
All right.
Which you already know, but the world needs to know that Walker has now said my name, which was my New Year's present.
Yep.
I came in.
Not only did he say it, he shouted it with glee.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me set the scene. So Katie and I go to the same New Year's Eve party every year because my brother-in-law hosts it. And I got there fashionably late because I thought everyone was getting there at like 8 o'clock, but I was wrong.
No, because most of us have kids who go to bed closer to 7.
That makes more sense. But in my head, I was like, we got to be there until at least 12. I don't want to get there at 7. But anyways, so I walk into the living room. First of all, everything is black light, which was kind of cool. We were all wearing neon. And I think the very first thing Katie said was, Walker, who is that? And Walker looks up from where he's playing and he goes, Aunt Hannah? And I was like, ah! Because mind you, my own nephew has not even said my name. He's saying everyone else's names besides mine. He was so sweet. And he said it a bunch more times that night, too.
Yes. And he says it all the time, too. We were talking about you earlier, right before nap time, because I was talking about the podcast. I was like, oh, Shelton, since you'll be home and laid up all week, we got to get back into our movie nights. I was like, we'll have Hannah come over and you can join us for our movie night thing. And
I'm sure he was real enthusiastic about that.
Well, he's like, can I pick the movie? And I was like, yeah, but you have to pick it from the box.
Yeah. Yes. From this selection.
From this collection. Mm-hmm. And Walker goes, and Hannah? And also, whenever he gets upset sometimes and he needs to, like, calm down and, like, self-regulate and whatnot, or just sometimes to entertain him, he loves looking through the photos and videos on my phone because he'll go phone and go, wah. Because he wants to see the pictures of Walker, of himself. Yeah. And anytime we get to the group photos from New Year's, and I'll go through and I'm like, who's that? Aunt G for Aunt Jillian, and Aunt B, Aunt Hannah, and Mama, Pom-Pom. Sometimes he'll just skip Mama and go straight to Pom-Poms, which is fine because Pom-Poms are life.
Oh my gosh. It made me very happy. And then I gave him my glow sticks. Mm-hmm. I was saving those. I was told to save them for Tolly because he liked to break them, but I was like, screw that kid. He don't say my name.
He hasn't earned glow sticks.
He has not earned the glow sticks, so I let Walker break the glow sticks. And then I gave him one, and then he got upset with it, so I took it back. My last announcement is a shout out to Ologies, one of my favorite podcasts, because they were the inspiration for this episode. And also because I stole several of their sources. And because Allie Ward has a kick-ass website for that podcast and lists all of her sources and also has, like, extensive sources.
Is this a subtle suggestion for me to make my New Year's resolution being a better webmaster?
No. This is just me maybe developing a crush on Allie Ward. I don't know. Or just saying that I need to...
I would like to do more with our website, but I have the time. I don't have the motivation.
That's
fair. And I'm doing other things.
You have a life outside of this. Oh, all right. Well, anyways, you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, let me start with a question. All right. So when Shelton was having his gallbladder removed, did his heart stop?
If it did, doctor did not tell me.
Okay, great.
And also, when you have the patient portal through the hospital, he was able to download all of the surgery notes. So, I mean, he was able to get, like, basically the minutes of his surgery.
Okay.
And as far as I know, there was no mention of heart stopping.
Heart stopping, okay.
I do know somebody who was having open heart surgery and was awake for it.
What?
Yes.
For open heart, like they woke up on accident?
Basically, he wasn't able to move. He couldn't feel anything.
Stop it.
But he could hear everything.
Okay, I low-key want to do an episode on anesthesia awareness.
So he told, after the surgery, the doctor came in and he's like, okay, everything went great. How are you feeling? And he's like, good, but next time you got to put me under better. He's like, no. You were under. Trust us, like everything was fine. He's like, no, I was awake. I could hear y'all talking. And he's like, that was probably something you dreamed, like, your brain probably and your subconscious probably. And he started reciting back parts of their conversation, and the doctor was like, okay, so I'm going to note that you have a resistance to the anesthesia drugs.
He's like, we're going to get our lawyers in here real quick.
Yeah. Did you just sign a few documents?
Hold on.
Please don't sue. I'm going to go check and make sure that my malpractice insurance is up to date.
He's like, would you like some cake? It's real good. Okay. Well, had Shelton's heart stopped and he needed to be resuscitated, he may have had a near-death experience, which is what today's episode's about.
It sounded like that woman that got in the accident right outside of my house right before I came here. It sounded like she had a near-death experience the way she was wailing and carrying on.
I know.
And I'm not trying to belittle anyone who has panic attacks or very loud emotional responses to very stressful traumatic events like a car accident. But this woman was just at the top of her lungs crying and carrying on.
Katie came into my house and was just so casual. She's like, you hear those sirens? I know where they're going. I'm like, oh, cool. Where?
My street.
You were so casual about it. I thought you were going to be like, my house, my stove's on fire. It's fine.
Shelton just called me.
I thought you were just like, everyone's fine. They're all out on the street. It's whatever.
Nope. There was an accident right out, at the corner of the house. And, the woman was just...
I hope everyone's okay.
Well, she was, like, screaming and wailing like she had gotten hit. Or, like, she'd gotten, her leg run over or something. Like, she was in pain. But she was just standing there screaming and freaking out. Meanwhile, the driver of the other car, whose airbags deployed, like, I saw him a minute later open and then, like, kind of, like, roll out of the car.
Oh.
Like, he literally rolled onto the ground and then stood up. And I think it was because the way the airbags were, they were still inflated, that he was struggling to just kind of get out, and the easiest thing was to...
So no one was, like, trapped inside a car?
Yeah. Any and all passengers. I think there was only the woman in her car, and then the driver and a passenger in the other car. But the passenger, she was just sitting on the ground. Like, she got out, and I saw her standing and then sitting, and I think she was probably just rattled. And, which is, again, it was a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
This woman is allowed to scream and freak out about it. It was just really funny. Oh my, you are. You are very expressive.
Yes. Okay, well, let me define a near-death experience. And this is a definition that I cobbled together on my own. Okay. It is a phenomenon experienced during life-threatening events or during reversible clinical death, like during surgery or during cardiac arrest. in which a person has a profound personal experience that cannot be explained by current medicine or science. And we will get much more into detail about what that means. So the phenomenon has been around, as far as we know, like pretty much forever. Like,
this is a phrase that I think everyone has heard.
yes. And like, I feel like sometimes it's used to mean like, oh, I had a near-death experience, meaning like I was almost died.
Yeah, or like, I had an oven once in an apartment that was real old. And I was preheating to bake some cookies.
Oh dear.
And I opened the oven and flames literally are shooting out.
Oh dear.
Like a torch or a flamethrower or something, like angry flames shooting out. And so I immediately closed the oven, turned off the oven, turned around and grabbed the fire extinguisher at the ready, but just turning off the oven.
Right.
One of the coils broke.
Oh.
And that was what happened because it just got old and degraded, whatever.
Right.
And so that's not a near-death experience.
Right.
But I think a lot of people would use or describe an experience like that as a near-death. Because, oh my God, I almost died.
Yes.
I didn't.
Yes. This is I
didn't even get singed.
This is an experience that your consciousness has. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think it is an overused phrase that people use, like, I literally whatever.
Yes.
My head literally exploded.
No, it didn't.
It did not. I wish it had.
You wouldn't be here.
Because then you wouldn't be telling me this story.
You wouldn't be here. This topic is, because it's like I don't know if it's technically a scientific field. The topic of this is so interesting to me. Like, first of all, I've read the Wikipedia page like 8 times now. I've read, I think, every link associated with it. I've read a couple scientific papers. Thank you. Humble brag. It's wild. Like, oh, okay. Let me tell you about it.
Dive right in.
Okay. So it's been around like forever. Like, people have been having these, as far as we know, like since humans have existed. But it hasn't been studied until like much, much more recently. So in 1847, a young Royal Navy soldier named Francis, I really want to say Beaufort, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Beaufort.
No. Beaufort.
Beaufort?
Yeah.
Aren't we? I thought we were the only people who said Beaufort.
No, Beaufort is wrong.
Oh, Beaufort's wrong. Okay.
Beaufort's stupid.
Okay, so Beaufort is correct.
Oh.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
In French, you don't say someone's très beau. Très beau.
Okay, great.
Very handsome.
Okay, so Francis Beaufort, 1847, he described a near-death experience that he had while drowning in 1791. So the experience happened in 1791. He essentially almost died while drowning, but didn't.
So I guess was drowning, lost consciousness. Someone rescued him and resuscitated.
Yes, and he's later describing that while he was essentially dying, he saw past events of his life laid out in detail before him.
Hence the "my life flashed before my eyes" phrase.
Yes. Near-death experiences was described as a syndrome as early as 1892 by Swiss geologist Albert Heim.
Geologist?
He's also... Oh, I wish I could do a whole episode on him.
Who's stopping you?
I know. I'm really like, this is my own podcast. I could really
You're the boss.
I could do it on whatever I want.
I mean, I can't even censor you because they're always a surprise.
So he reported on a series of subjective observations by various people who had come close to death, specifically by falling. So he interviewed people, workers falling from scaffolding.
Oh, that's something that terrifies me.
I know. Climbers falling from great heights. He also talked to soldiers who had been injured at war, which doesn't have to do with falling, but whatever. But this was also after Albert himself, 20 years earlier, had also fallen a great height because he was also a mountain climber, geologist, mountain climber, hand in hand. He also studied mountain dogs.
Jack of all trades.
I know. He also had a theory about, like, curing warts by, like, just thinking about them. He's a weird dude.
Okay. Officially request an episode on him.
He's very cool. So what he said about his fall when he was falling off a mountain, he said, quote, "I merely heard the blows that injured my head and back. I felt no pain." And then he cited several other accounts of people who had fallen, and they apparently had no fear or anxiety while falling. They also said that time seemed to slow down during their fall, and their senses seemed to be heightened, and they claimed to feel no pain upon impact. And one man was quoted as saying, quote, "I cannot think of a milder, finer way to die than by falling off a great height."
Which is
wild, right?
Not at all what I would think, because
Right? That seems like the worst, one of the worst ways to die.
I would be panicking while falling and be like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I'm falling. And then...
Because you have so much time to think about it.
Right?
Right? So, Albert's main takeaway from both his fall and, like, studying all of these was that people who die by falling don't suffer.
That's actually kind of a relief.
I know.
That's one less thing for me to be afraid of now.
Know.
Like, obviously, I'm still going to be cautious anytime I'm, like, at a great height. If I'm doing some work on the roof, or if we're out hiking and there's a steep cliff or something, is, you know what?
Still be a little cautious.
Be careful, because I don't want to fall and die or severely injure myself. But if I did, apparently it won't hurt.
Couldn't think of a milder, finer way to go. And this is a quote. "It was his aim to spread this information to the bereaved, who often seemed to grieve profoundly from thinking that their deceased loved ones must have suffered terribly during their fatal accident."
But that's literally what we were just saying, is that it's kind of a relief to know, because we both said I would be freaking out the entire time I'm falling.
Exactly. So, like...
And the imagined impact, like the pain.
Yes. So, like, the
last thing you would know in this life is
fear and pain.
Yeah,
so he, like, did this study and was basically like, no, great news, everyone. If your loved one died by falling off a mountain, they didn't feel any fear or pain. They were fine. They just, like, felt peace and no pain.
So, sorry you still, like, don't have your loved one, but that's one less piece of, like, pain and guilt that you have to carry on. Like, still grieve, that sucks. Yeah. But it doesn't suck as bad as you thought it did.
I know.
That is a huge relief.
I know.
I like this guy.
I know.
Thank you. That is a great service that he provided society or humanity.
I know.
And we should take this man's work and continue to spread it out into the world.
I agree. Also, he's like, everyone, we should probably think our warts away.
Yeah. Also, I mean, not everything is a gym, but
also I think his wife was like one of the first like female doctors in Switzerland or something. I don't know. There's a lot of cool stuff.
So he's a smart man by marrying a smart woman.
I know. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff about him. So, in 1968, Celia Green published 400 firsthand accounts of out-of-body experiences, which are different, but similar. And then in 1975, the phenomenon was finally named by Dr. Raymond Moody, who conducted the first large-scale study of around 150 patients. So he was the first one who actually coined the term near-death experience. So since his study, it's since been determined that nearly 9 million people in the United States have had a near-death experience. And according to surveys conducted in the United States, Australia, and Germany, 4 to 15% of the population in general have had a near-death experience. Okay. So in terms of like starting the whole general, like, field of study. We've got Bruce Grayson, who is a psychiatrist. So I don't know if I guess he's a doctor. So Dr. Bruce Grayson, Dr. Kenneth Ring, who's a psychologist, and then Dr. Michael Sabum, who's a cardiologist. So they were all, like, instrumental in introducing the study of near-death experiences to the academic world. Fun fact, the Ologies episode, Allie Ward interviews Dr. Bruce Grayson.
Cool.
So, like, I listened to that, and then I did all of this research and got all familiar with, like, all the names. And then I went back and looked at, like, the episode. I was like, oh, yeah, who did she interview? And I was like, oh, Dr. Grayson? I was like, oh, my gosh. Celebrity. It's like, I should go back and listen again. He's famous. Anyways, speaking of Dr. Grayson, so he developed a 16-question multi-choice questionnaire that can be universally used in all near-death experiences. So this was a way of, like, instead of just, like, asking random questions to everyone, this was a way to, like, be more consistent in how we study these, like, very variable things.
Yeah.
So you end up with a rating of 0 to 32, and you end up with a much more objective, consistent result. Between 1975 and 2005, there have been 2,500 self-reported near-death experiences in the United States and 600 self-reported outside of the United States that have been studied retrospectively. And then in the late 80s, there was a shift to start studying them prospectively. So the difference being, before we were, like, asking people, hey, have you had this experience? Yes, let's talk about it. Like, basically put out a survey. Has anyone had this? Come forward. Let's talk about it. And then they were like, let's try to, like, catch it as it happens, which, as you can imagine, is much harder to do.
Yeah, so that would be like standing outside of a hospital being like, hey, did you have surgery? Did you have a near-death experience?
Yes, that's essentially kind of what they were doing.
Because it's not like you can go, like, door to door of hospital rooms and ask people because HIPAA.
Yeah.
Or you can't ask doctors or, like, surgeons and be like, hey, did you have someone die temporarily on your table?
Well, because you can't predict, like, who's going to go into cardiac... I mean, because cardiac arrest is, like, one of the most common... ways, because your heart stops.
You know, I've had, you know, relatives and, like, friends of relatives, like Shelton's grandmother had a hip replacement. You know, my grandmother had hip surgery at, 98, I think she was. Anyway. But anyway, Shelton's grandmother was, like, 99 or something. And basically, it's like when you're that old... and otherwise not that healthy, and you go for surgery, you're just... At that point, it's kind of like, let's say our goodbyes.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Yeah.
But then they were fine.
Yeah.
And then there's perfectly healthy people like Shelton. I mean, healthy outside of the whole upset gallbladder thing. That will go in for, like, a routine procedure and not make it through. Like, you cannot always predict it.
Yeah. Well, of the prospective studies that have been done, one in 1988 was a study of 10 Dutch hospitals, found that 18% of cardiac arrest survivors had a near-death experience, but that was only out of 344. So, like, again, you're still having a really pretty small sample size. Yeah. And then as of 2005, 95% of world cultures have made some documented mention of near-death experiences. And according to studies, the content of near-death experiences cross-culturally is really, really similar. So, like, regardless of, and, like, we'll talk about this too, like, a lot of, which, like, I think this kind of goes without saying, like, in Western culture, obviously, you know, you might identify, like, oh, the being of light as a Christian god.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you know, in a non-Western culture, they're going to identify it as, you know, something else.
Nirvana.
Yeah.
Valhalla.
But they're still seeing essentially the same content.
Yeah.
So, like, what's crazy is,
but
like...
they're internalizing it differently.
Yes, they're interpreting it differently. But the content is essentially the same. Which is, I think, really crazy. Anyways. Okay.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to it's one of, like, the most basic things of the human experience is trying to connect with others. And it's like, hey, this crazy thing happened to me. Has this happened to you? Someone you know? Like, trying to find, like, to survive being alive.
Yeah.
You need that, like, oh, I'm not alone in experiencing
not the only one.
this.
Yeah. All right. So, speaking of the content of near-death experiences. So, typically, usually, what happens in them? All right. So, usually, there is some kind of leaving the body and rising upwards. So that part is known as an out-of-body experience. Also, that is a whole different thing. Not always a near-death experience, but whatever.
It's kind of like the all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs.
Yes.
Pretty much all near-death experiences have an out-of-body experience, but not every out-of-body experience is a near-death experience.
Yes. Although I don't think all near-death... well... I don't know. It said not all near-death experiences have out-of-body experiences, but I feel like that just means not all near-death experiences have a situation where you're looking at your body. Because I think that's what they mean is, like, you can be looking at your body.
Well, you said there's, like, an upward feeling, like a feeling of...
rising upwards. And yeah. So sometimes you're able to, like, view your body as you're, like, leaving it, and sometimes you're even able to see, like, resuscitation efforts or, like, the surgery that's happening on you or, like, whatever is currently happening to your body as it's happening. There's usually some kind of passing through a darkness, which is often described as a tunnel, and you're usually going towards some kind of bright light. In the light, you're usually feeling some kind of overwhelming love, as well as peace and comfort, just, like, overwhelming good feelings. Unconditional love has been, like, often, like, that's, like, I love all of this so much. I'm just like, ugh, I feel so comforted.
Do you ever think about how, you know, like, after you die, this is more kind of along the lines of reincarnation or whatever, but after you die, you don't go to a heaven or a hell or a limbo or something, but you just go on to another life.
You're usually reborn.
And yeah, like I said, it's more along the lines of reincarnation. You're reborn, and either on a, you know, parallel plane, or maybe in the future. Because again, time is a human construct and not necessarily just a line that we're all trying. Anyway, but do you ever think people who die and come back to life or are resuscitated or whatever are miscarriages in the future?
Ooh.
So, like,
dang,
you know, someone has a miscarriage and it's because whatever soul
it's
like was...
they took him back.
Yeah. It was like, no, we're not done with this soul yet. We can't use it in there.
I don't know. That's wild.
Yeah. I don't know. I just had that thought when you were talking about... I don't know why.
That is crazy. Especially... Well, hold on to that thought until we get to the end, which with other... I told Katie I was going to get existential at the end. So.
I wanted to get existential early. Bring on existentialism. They were some of my favorite writers.
All right, so we're in our overwhelming love and peaceful light. Usually there is an encounter with spiritual beings, sometimes interpreted as spirit guides or angels. Sometimes they are recognizable family members or loved ones who have died. Oftentimes there is a life review, which is often described as a full color panorama of their lives. So, like, not just like you're imagining it in your head, but like, here's your life laid out, like, as a movie. And this part I found so interesting. You're not just seeing your life, but you're experiencing it or viewing it through the eyes of others, or understanding how your life or your actions affected others.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, or like how
you impacted or touched other people's lives.
Like there was a sense of like, not like judgment, but like, but like kind of right and wrong, or like, you know, like how your life impact
you. You helped somebody, you know, you helped an old lady across the street, and you're seeing that more or less from her perspective, and you feel the gratitude towards your actions, and then you find the time where you were bullying some kid on the playground, and you feel the negative feelings that they experienced due to your actions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And then there is a moment where you are sent back. And usually that involves there being some kind of clear boundary line, and some kind of understanding that if you cross the boundary, you cannot then return to your body. Like crossing the boundary means you're gone. You're gone. Sometimes you are told that you have to go back because it's not your time. Sometimes you're given a choice of you can stay or you can go back. And almost everyone who like is given the choice says that they ultimately choose to go back. Well, they say, I really don't want to go back. I want to stay because this place is cool. But they chose to go back for the sake of someone else, usually their children, which makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Like if you've got children that you are still raising, or any loved one. I mean, I'm thinking now, I'm like, well, hell, I'd go back for my parents, for Jarek, for Kelly. I go back for a lot of reasons, but in his study that he did, Dr. Moody, he concluded that there's roughly 9 steps in a near-death experience.
It's faster than the 12-step program.
No. He also noted that not every near-death experience has to include every step, but I'm like, you know, he's a scientist, so he's got to break it down.
Yeah, we've got to put some order to the chaos.
Exactly. So number 1 is sudden peace and relief of pain. Number 2 is perception of a relaxing sound or beautiful music, which I like. Mood music. Number 3 is ascending above the body, sometimes being able to see resuscitation attempts or medical procedures. Number 4, leaving the earthly realm and ascending quickly through a tunnel of light in a universe of darkness. Number 5, arriving at a bright heavenly place. Number 6, being met by people of light who are often deceased loved ones. Number 7, meeting some kind of deity, often interpreted or perceived according to their personal religious or spiritual beliefs, that emits pure love, and life, whatever. So like meeting God. Number 8, receiving a life review and understanding how your life choices, good and bad, have affected them and others. And then number 9, returning to your earthly body, either because you're told that it's not your time or because you're given a choice to stay and go back. Stay or go back.
Did you ever see the Netflix show Lock and Key?
I think I saw like an episode of it.
So I really enjoy it. I need to go watch the next season. Anyway, there's this house, and it's full of these magical keys, and each of them do, you know, something different.
Okay.
Walker
would love this.
Oh, he would lose his mind over those magical keys, and I would lose my mind too because of the chaos that he would bring. You know, like for example, there's the mind key where you put it in the back of your neck, and it shows a door of some sort. It's different for everyone. You walk through that door, and you are inside your mind, and that's where all of like your memories and things are.
Okay. I don't want to go
there. So
there.
meanwhile, like you're having an out of body experience because your body is just sitting there, but you and maybe whoever you're with can literally go into your mind and like pull.
I don't want anyone going in there.
Yeah, me either. I don't want to go in there. It's terrible enough already. So there's another key that will change your appearance, and your voice and everything to anyone else you want.
Okay.
And then there's this other key that this is making me think of, and I think I guess they call it the ghost key.
Okay.
Because you just put it into a door, and when you open and walk through that door, your body doesn't walk through the door. Your body falls down, and I think is, for all intents and purposes, dead.
Ooh, okay.
Now, I don't know if it's like dead, or just in a coma dead.
Okay.
Meanwhile, you're a ghost. No one can see you.
Ooh.
You can fly around. You can travel through walls and whatnot. And there's one person that used the key that then somebody closed the door and took the key out of the lock.
Oh, no.
And they weren't able to get back through the door, so they couldn't get back into their body. It was okay, because he was a bad guy.
Oh, okay.
But I'm
but
just
now
like,
he's a ghost forever?
But yeah, and it's like, ooh, what if you can't get back? I don't know, for some reason, just talking about the being able to see the resuscitation, like he was able to actually see his body being taken away. And it's like, okay, what happens now?
Well, yeah, if you can't get back, then you're dead.
Yeah,
And we don't know about your experience because you died.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing is like, I'm trying to remember which. I want to say it was the Albert Heim paper, where he was saying like, great news, death isn't terrible. But how do we know? Because the dead can't tell us. Oh, we're just going to ask people who almost died.
The almost dead.
Very nearly dead.
Mostly dead.
Mostly dead. So, most people who have a near-death experience... Sorry, I have it in here as NDEs or NDEers. So most people who have a near-death experience, oh my gosh.
I think our listeners are smart enough to understand when you say an NDE.
I know.
To know what you're talking about.
I know. Okay. Most people who have an NDE
Here we go.
Also report positive after effects as a result of the experience.
Kind of like Scrooge's night with the ghosts.
Yes.
Of past, present, future.
Exactly.
Next day, he's changing his ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, did you see that? Random, but speaking of Scrooge, did you see that thing going around on Facebook that was like, with inflation, what Scrooge was actually paying whatever his employer's name was,
No.
or employee? I am not that familiar with A Christmas Carol. With inflation, his employee was making like double minimum wage. And so everyone's like, wait a minute. Like all these people who are making like, minimum wage or like barely more than that are like, wait a minute. Scrooge was punished for being like miserly and greedy. Shouldn't my employer also be punished for being greedy and miserly for not paying me? Like his employee was making more than what I make.
Oh, God.
So I'm just saying the state of North Carolina who pays me, maybe look into paying me more. So back to Scrooge and also people who had similar experiences. So examples of these after effects. People report having a greater appreciation for life in general, higher self-esteem, greater concern for others, less concern for material wealth.
Because it really hits home that you can't take it with you.
Can't take it with you, doesn't matter.
Yep.
A greater sense of purpose and self-understanding, a desire to learn, elevated spirituality, which does not necessarily mean elevated religious or religion, just spirituality. Greater ecological sensitivity and or planetary concern, which we love to see.
Yep.
And no longer...
More people should have NDEs.
I know. And then no longer worrying or fearing death, which we love.
You know what? I've officially decided
that you would like to have an NDE because
no,
I do.
I'm pretty good on that. I don't much care. I want to live comfortably.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, I don't care much about the material wealth thing. I already clearly have a very strong concern for our environment and ecological thing. Mm-hmm. I generally think I'm a nice person and care about others.
You are.
Which is kind of evidenced by my next thing is I rarely wish ill on a person. Mm-hmm. Rarely. And even still, it's more like that person was mean or they're a scumbag and I wish karma on them kind of a thing. So they're spiritual already.
Yeah. You wish you to have the day that you deserve.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't necessarily want you to get hit by a bus, but I definitely want something worse than stepping on a Lego.
Yeah.
So I don't wish people to die, ever.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to start, when I see, bad people out in the world, I'm going to wish a near-death experience on them. Like, I don't want you to die. I want you to almost die.
I want you to clinically die, but then be resuscitated.
And come back as a better person.
And while you are flatlined, I wish
Learn
that you
the error of your ways.
Yes.
I can think of about 30 political leaders right now who, if literally only a few of them had a near-death experience, our world would already be greatly improved if they come back better.
Right? And there was, I forget where I read it, but either one person or some article or something said that one of the things that people came back saying was the greatest thing that they thought, or they came back with thinking that the greatest thing that you could do in life was learning to love, or to learn or to love better, or learning, I don't know, that was what they came back with from their experience with, and it was the
greatest thing you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return.
What's that from?
Moulin Rouge.
Oh. Don't say that like I've seen that movie a million times. I've seen it 5 times.
I think I have too.
I should watch it again. Anyway, I think you're right. I think a lot of people would benefit from having a positive near-death experience. In 2014, Dr. Jeffrey Long put forth 9 points of evidence supporting near-death experiences as real phenomenon.
All right.
Okay. I love these. Okay, so number 1, reporting subnormal consciousness Reporting subnormal consciousness should not be physically or medically possible in the people who are reporting them. So, we said that having, when you're clinically dead is a lot of times when this is happening. And a lot of times that happens when you go into cardiac arrest. So 10 to 12 seconds after cardiac arrest, there is no significant measurable brain cortical activity. But many near-death experiencers report having these during cardiac arrest. So, when a machine is measuring your brain activity and saying,
nothing happening here.
Nothing that we can measure is happening.
There's no electricity in the brain noodles.
Nothing happening. These people are coming back and saying, I had this entire experience.
Which sounds like a wild acid trip. And haven't there been studies or people have taken these mind-altering drugs like acid or LSD or whatever, and then been put in an MRI, and they show that certain parts of the brain that are less active. So basically they put somebody in an MRI, totally stone cold sober, everything's fine. They're like, oh look, these are very colorful active parts of the brain. These are the less active parts of the brain.
Right.
And then they give them some sort of mind-altering drug, do another MRI, and lit up like a dang Christmas tree.
Right. Yes.
I mean, I feel like I've seen pictures from the studies like this.
Yes.
So if someone's having, and I feel like an acid trip is probably, or this near-death experience is probably similar to a more, directed or controlled acid trip.
Yes. If you're hallucinating, your brain is going to be...
Yeah, so if you're just coming up with all this crazy, there was a light and pretty music, and my great Aunt Susan who died 20 years ago. everyone was welcoming. It was great. I felt awesome. You feel like there would be a lot of electrical impulses going off in your brain.
Yes, exactly. So much of this is happening when people are like brain dead, for lack of a better term. 74.4% of people who had near-death experiences surveyed in 1998 reported experiencing, quote, more consciousness and alertness than usual during their experience. So another thing was essentially also the opposite of like a dreamlike state. So it's not like a foggy, murky thing. It's like, I'm the most aware I've ever been in my life. This is the clearest I've ever been seeing or understanding
you're not
anything.
Bogged down by the physical realm.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if my sock is on wrong and the seam is like touching my toe where it's not supposed to, or if this is extreme examples because of ADHD and whatnot, or if my tag is sticking up and I feel it and it's like I feel that physical, I'm like, I'm trying to listen to what you're telling me, but all I can think about is this physical discomfort, this little thing that's bothering me. I'm trying so hard to listen, but when you're out of your physical body and out of the physical realm, you're allowed to focus on a lot more.
Exactly. All right, point number 2.
Sounds so nice.
I know. Oh my gosh. Okay, point number 2. Out-of-body observances, which are reported by 45% of near-death experience havers. So this, I think, is specifically talking about looking down at your body, are more accurate than those who don't report having like a near-death experience. So, meaning, when compared to people who don't report having a near-death experience, people who do have a near-death experience and have this out-of-body observance, those people are better able to describe like their own resuscitation.
Yeah, like, okay, you were, like you were doing compressions and you were counting things and you were over there crying in the corner.
I was going to say that.
And you were pacing and freaking out and tearing at your hair.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I want to say there was like a 97% rate of like accuracy where they were like, okay, that was like insanely, freakishly, correct. Whereas people who weren't claiming to have a near-death experience or out-of-body experience, when they said, can you, describe what your resuscitation was, they were essentially just kind of guessing as to what it was like.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you know how, like, you lose one of your senses, your others become stronger thing? Like, small amount. Not like you're all of a sudden Superman on certain things.
Yeah.
But it could be, too, that, like, maybe they can't actually see it, but your sense of hearing, and again, like, that separation from the physical thing allows you to concentrate more and be like, okay, well, this person was over here, and this person was over here, and that person was over there, and, like, I could hear somebody rustling in the corner. It was this person.
Yeah. And I think also that this is just, like, probably the easiest part of this specific thing to, like, study and quantify, because they've also had, like, which I'll talk about when we talk about, like, specific examples, but, like in specific examples when people are able to say, like, and then I was, like, looking at this person down the hall, and they were saying this thing, and then the surgeon said this thing, and then they've been able to go back and, like, verify those in specific cases. I think those are harder to, like, put into a study, and it's just easier to say, like, can you describe your resuscitation?
Right.
But in
the more involved ones, because they vary more.
Yeah, but those, I think, have also been, like, very accurate when they're able to be verified.
Like, there was a doctor down the hall talking to a nurse about another patient, and I don't know anyone's names, but they said this to this about patient number, in the room 320.
Yeah, and it's like, okay. Yeah. Okay, number 3 is near-death experiences in blind or visually impaired people. This is, again, a really small...
Yeah, this has got to be niche.
I know, a really small sample size. But in the largest study conducted on blind or visually impaired people that had near-death experiences, 14 people were blind from birth, who also had near-death experiences. And of those 14, 9 of them, which is 64%, reported having vision during their near-death experiences. Which you can't, I'm just going to leave it at that.
How
you
do
can't
you know?
do that. You can't do, I'm just going to leave it at that with, you can't, okay. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Other than
Well, it's like, if you've never had it, how would you know?
How do you describe it?
How do you describe the ability of sight to someone who doesn't have
who's
it?
never had it? Yeah.
Like it's kind of like trying to describe sound to a deaf person who has literally never heard a sound in their life.
Yeah.
And that's why those stories about people who get cochlear implants and like losing their mind, like crying and being overwhelmed by literally like the sound of someone sneezing.
Oh my gosh.
Not even like pretty noises, but there was one person that didn't know that farts made noises.
Oh no.
Like, but any of the stories, and I love watching the videos of like, especially kids who get to hear their parents' voice for the first time.
I'm just gonna drink more wine so I don't cry.
Yeah, no, I'm a total sucker. I start with like dogs welcoming their military parents home, and then it goes to kids welcoming their military parents home. And then it starts with funny cat videos. Like, I can vividly remember one night being up way past bedtime. It's like 4 a.m. almost, and I'm like bawling my eyes out because at midnight I couldn't really sleep, so I started watching some funny cat videos, and 4 hours later I'm watching videos of like young children getting cochlear implants and hearing their mother's voice for the first time. And just, it's a very beautiful, emotional experience for everyone. And I'm there crying my eyes out. Like, holy crap, I need to sleep.
Oh my gosh. Cute animal videos. I can't. Sorry, and also children hearing for the first time.
anyone hearing for the
first time.
There's also like the people, like the husbands who hear their wife's voice for the first time, and vice versa.
No. Also, children who get like glasses for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
Or
colorblind people who get the special glasses. Yep. Yes.
Jeez.
Like, and how overwhelming the world becomes to them.
I know. Those are one of those. I have to watch those sometimes when I get really, like, bogged down about, like, living in this age, and I'm, like, so fed up with technology and AI and, like, everything. I have to be like, there's good things about technology. There's good things about living in 2024. Like, look at good things that technology has created. We let visually impaired children see their parents. We let hearing impaired people hear.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Stop crying.
That was one hell of a tangent that we went on there.
Also videos of paralyzed dogs who get
the wheelchairs. I saw a dog in a wheelchair the other day. I think we were in Floyd or something. I don't remember. But I was like, Walker, look, that dog has wheels.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Look, we finally have proof that I'm not actually dead inside.
Oh my gosh.
This emotional camel actually leaks from time to time.
All it took was visually impaired people having near-death experiences.
Yep. That's the little crack in my armor and releases the dam.
Okay, number 4. This is just one sentence. While under general anesthesia, the brain isn't able to have a lucid, organized memory. Period.
So I've had surgery and been under general anesthesia. And while I remember more than they said I probably would, I still don't remember much. So they're like, you probably won't even remember being wheeled into the OR.
Yeah.
And I did. I remember being in there, and I remember being on the table, and I remember them taking my arms maybe out of the sleeves of my gown or basically they were positioning my arms and putting things on them. They were manipulating, and they were still talking to me, and I was kind of, I doubt I was talking back, but I think I was grunting.
Yeah.
And then I remember them telling me about counting, and the count backwards from 100, and I think I made it all the way to 98.
Nice. Good for you.
So basically it was, they gave me the pre-drugs, and then once they got me strapped into the real drugs, I was out, and I remember nothing from that surgery.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, like, essentially, unless you're having a, like, anesthesia, like a, what's it called? Anesthesia awareness, waking anesthesia, whatever.
Because that does happen. Yes.
It does. And I will talk about that in a bit. But, like, the whole point of anesthesia is that you don't remember things.
Yes.
And
you are out.
Your brain can't form memories. And that's the opposite of what people are claiming, is that they are making... I mean, essentially, if you're doubting them, they're, quote, making up fantasies. But it's like, you've given them drugs that prevent that from happening. So which is it? The drugs don't work, or... they're lying,
or
like
they've experienced something that you cannot fully explain.
Yeah, like,
think back to, like, coma patients. A lot of people who have been in comas, both, you know, I guess natural, but also medically induced comas, report, you know, remembering hearing things. So, like, they always say, like, oh, they're in a coma, but go ahead and talk to them.
Yeah.
Tell them stories. They'll remember it. Sometimes maybe you tell them a story and it plays like a movie or something in their head. And or if you make up a story, they might wake up and think that it actually happened. I mean, I have dreamed so hard sometimes that I have woken up and thought, did that actually happen, or did I just dream that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like anytime you wake up mad at your spouse because of something they did in their sleep, and you're like, I know you didn't actually do it. I know it was just a dream. But I'm still feeling the feelings from that.
Apparently I cheated on Jarek last night.
Oh, you bitch.
I know, right?
How dare you?
In his dreams.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything in my dreams.
I built a go-kart with my ex-landlord. That was a Mitch Hedberg joke, and bonus points to anyone who got that. But, yeah, no, with anesthesia, like, Sheldon, also he's like, yeah, I remember the nurse saying this, and then the next thing I remember, she was saying this other thing, and I think he said he asked when the surgery was. When are you going to start the surgery? And she's like, no, honey, you're all done.
You're done.
So he has no recollection of it. He was out.
That's very good.
And I think that's the vast majority of people who go under general anesthesia.
As it should be.
As it's intended.
Exactly how you want it to work. Yes. Okay, number 5 is that life reviews often contain forgotten details from earlier in life, or the feelings and emotions of others, presumably that could be verified, like, later by those other people.
Like, oh, I, announced my pregnancy at a family gathering, not realizing that my sister or cousin had just miscarried.
Right.
And she was very, hurt by it or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So you could verify. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, cousin, sister, somebody, I just realized that this thing that I had done may have hurt you, and I'm sorry.
And also, like, the forgotten details from earlier life, like, I feel like that must be wild, like, especially if, like, someone, like, if I had, like, a near-death experience and I, had a life review, and then I was telling my mom about it and mentioned something about when I was a baby, that obviously I wouldn't remember, but she could verify because she was there when I was a baby. I don't know. But then similarly, number 6 is encountering deceased loved ones. So part of that is that a lot of times people report encountering someone that they either didn't know was dead, or a family member that they weren't close to or never knew in life. So like a grandparent that died before they were born, or like a relative that they never met. I've read about, which it's funny that I'm now skeptical of these stories after I've read all about these, but like I read that book, Heaven is for Real, which was written by not written by the little boy, but written about that little boy.
That one was the hoax, right?
Well, there is one that's a hoax, and I don't remember what it's called. This one I don't remember because I didn't read. I don't know. This one, the only reason I say I'm skeptical is because the way the book was written was like just very, very like, I don't know. I feel like I kind of want to read it again and just see like, I don't know. Does it follow? Does it have all the points of like a near-death experience? And and they're just interpreting it as like a very Christian thing. But one of the things that little boy allegedly encountered was a sister that he had never met because his parents had a miscarriage before he was born. And it was like he met this little girl and she said like, I'm your sister, but they never gave me a name, because I'm supposed to be your older sister or whatever. And he came back and told his parents that, and they were like, you should know about, like whatever. The other thing about encountering deceased loved ones during near-death experiences is that in hallucinations or dreams, you are much more likely to encounter people who are alive. Like if you're hallucinating or you're dreaming, the people that you're going to meet are almost definitely going to be people who are alive. You don't really dream or hallucinate about dead people. But no one having a near-death experience reports meeting a person who's still alive, unless it's someone that they think was alive, but then they later find out had died and they didn't realize had died, because that's also
because they hadn't heard the banshee.
Nice callback. Because that's another thing, is that people have said like they've encountered someone and then when they got back, they didn't realize that person had passed away at some point.
They're like, I saw Great Aunt Susan. We need to call her. Honey, she died like 2 years ago.
Yeah. Oof. Or like, she died like an hour ago while you were dead. Weirdly enough.
Imagine being in like a car accident or something and be like, and so was there with me, and like, yeah, no, they died on the way to the hospital.
Yikes. Number 7, this is one of my favorites, is that very young children have near-death experiences. So very young, meaning I want to say like 2.5 was like the youngest that they were able to interview. Mm-hmm. Which, like, yes, let's not think about 2.5-year-olds clinically dying. Yep. But the content of very young children's near-death experiences is the same as those of older children and adults, which is insane because children that young don't have the same, like, mental capacity. Like, if they were just making stuff up, they don't have the same mental capacity to just make up something that is the same.
I imagine, a young child, maybe not as young as 2.5, but very young still, mm-hmm. like looking at pictures and seeing a deceased relative and being like, granddaddy.
Yeah.
And being like, yes, that is your granddaddy, but you've never seen this photo before. We've mm-hmm. never told you about your granddaddy. And they'd be like, yeah, no, I saw. I know who it is.
This one of the scariest videos I've ever seen in my life. It shouldn't be. It's one of those, like, it's not, I say home video, whatever. It's like a phone video, but it's a kid who's like, I don't know, maybe Walker's age, maybe a little older. And the mom's just like, taking a video of him, and he's like standing near a doorway and he's like looking into a room and he's like, pop, pop. And he's like looking into the room and she's like, who?
Yeah.
But he's like clearly looking into the room and like kind of looking up. Uh-huh. And she's like very obvious. She's like,
I think I know what video you're talking
about. Yeah,
because
she's like, Pop's dead. Like, But he's like so clearly like seeing someone and recognizing someone and being like, Pop, Pop. And she like, I think she like runs into that room and there's no one there. I hate the fact that small children can see dead people.
That's why I tease Shelton so much about the shadow people. So Walker will wake up in the morning, and it's too early to get out of bed. And so he just lays in his crib, and he babbles to himself. And I joke that he's talking to the shadow people. It freaks Shelton out. He's like, stop saying that. I'm like, why? It's funny. It's just a joke. Obviously, he's just babbling because that's what kids do. And like, you can hear him. He can hear that he's literally practicing talking sometimes. Like, he'll try and say a word over and over again. And he'll try other things. Like, you can hear the difference between he's just blah, 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 and trying to practice talking.
Yeah.
And sometimes it sounds legit like he's having a conversation. He's like, you're just going to say the shadow people? And he's going to get older. And he's going to hear that and be like, oh, I was talking to the shadow people. And like, obviously he's, making that up, or he's just pulling from what he's heard you say. But it's going to be really creepy. We're going to actually start worrying that there's shadow people in the house.
Ugh. I mean, like, the minute someone dies up in his room, and then he starts, identifying them. The other thing about children having near-death experiences is that children are way less likely to be influenced by pre-existing cultural and religious beliefs. So, like, one of the theories is that people come back from realizing that they, clinically died or whatever, and then they want to find comfort in some way, and so they make up this idea that they went and, visited heaven and saw God and saw Jesus and whatever. But like a child, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old who, yeah, maybe you've taken them to church or whatever, but like maybe you haven't. Even so, like, a child isn't going to have that much of an ingrained, like religious or cultural, I don't know, belief system in them that they're going to immediately know those things, and probably also aren't naming them. So like when they're describing them, they're also probably not saying, and then I saw God, and then I saw angels. And thanks to things like Dr. Grayson's questionnaire, where we can be more objective and consistent, we're able to see that they're consistent with like the other accounts from like adults and older children and stuff. And then number 8 is that near-death experiences transverse cultural differences, which is similar, meaning everyone experiences from other cultures, the content matches, regardless of the religious beliefs and the...
We've all got the bright light, the pretty music, the calming presence, the understanding of peace and whatnot.
Yeah, and if it was a dream or a hallucination, those would differ from culture to culture. And then the last point of evidence is that people who have near-death experiences report significant changes in their life as a result of the experience, such as reduced fear of death, acceptance of others, being more loving and empathetic, which is consistent with their assessment that the experience was meaningful and significant, which means, like, at the very least, they believe something happened. So, like...
Also, we don't need to question. Like, I understand, wanting to question so that you can, really quantify and kind of categorize and catalog and, kind of order these experiences. And I have nothing wrong, or I have nothing against the wanting to have that survey and everything. But also, if somebody claims they had a near-death experience and they're a better person for it, just let them have it.
I know.
Just let them have it.
Why are you trying to take that away from them?
We don't need to question it. Like, don't poke holes in it. Just let them go be a good person. We need more of that.
We really do.
Let it happen.
So there are some proposed, like, scientific explanations. They're all bullshit, but I'm going to tell you what they are. So the first one is depersonalization. And this theory just says that when faced with a life-threatening situation or inescapable danger, the person would become detached from their body or feelings or perceptions of time. So essentially that a near-death experience is a hallucination. The criticism of this is kind of what we've said before, which is that hallucinations have been described as dreamlike. A lot of times they're described as unpleasant or characterized by anxiety, panic, emptiness. None of those are often reported in near-death experiences. Most of the time, near-death experiences are reported as having heightened senses of awareness and no loss of identity. Like, they're the opposite of hallucinations.
You can have two people in the exact same situation both hallucinate wildly different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, again, it's also highly unlikely everyone's hallucinating the same thing.
There's no consistency in hallucinations.
Exactly, yeah. Another one is expectancy. And so this is saying that a near-death experience is actually a conscious or subconscious creation of the mind in response to the stress or fear of death. It is what the person expects to see or experience that corresponds with their religious or cultural beliefs. Quote, imagining a heavenly place was in effect a way for them to soothe themselves through the stress of knowing that they were close to death. And the criticism of this is accounts of near-death experiences often differ from like that person's religious or personal expectations regarding death. So like atheists will have a near-death experience that brings them to a being of light when they before believed that there was nothing after death. And then also children who have no context for expecting anything after death or any kind of cultural or religious belief.
They not even old enough to understand death as a concept.
Yeah. This is my favorite one, birth. It's that near-death experiences are a form of reliving the trauma of birth. Traveling through a dark tunnel into a bright light / loving environment. And for whatever reason, the dying brain recreates this. Do you want to guess what the criticism for this is? It's very logical.
Tell me.
Newborns don't possess the visual acuity, spatial stability of their visual images, mental alertness, and cortical coding capacity to register memories of the birthing experience.
Right. That's
AKA,
very accurate.
Babies can't physically remember being born.
They can't see anything. They can't remember it.
Their brains can't remember. Also,
they don't work like that.
Also, people who were born by C-section have also had near-death experiences.
Yeah.
It's different ways to be born, people.
Yep.
They're not all...
And, I mean, even when you do travel down the tunnel, the old-fashioned way, it's not really... I mean, how do you describe it as a loving environment?
I feel like it's a terrifying environment that you come into.
It is.
I feel like you're leaving...
Sure, I loved him before he was born, and I immediately loved him once he was born. But also, like, as soon as he was out, there was a flurry of activity, and it was a lot of, like, sterile this, and he got a bath, and then he was...
I was gonna say,
he was screaming the whole time.
I feel
he screamed for like an hour almost. It felt like it was a long.
I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like you're leaving a warm, comfortable environment and then going to this like bright, awful, loud.
That's
world.
what I said. Is that he was born and he was mad about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't want to leave because it was induced, and 12 hours later, they had to break my water.
It was induced, and he was like,
because he's like,
good.
I'm good. Like, I didn't go into labor. They put me into labor, and I was like, I wasn't even feeling contractions until they induced me. So, yeah, no. And also, birth is a traumatic experience for the infant.
Yeah.
Some of them, your head literally gets misshapen sometimes.
Gosh, I know.
It's, shoulders get dislocated often.
Ugh. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about that.
Yep. It's a very traumatic experience for everyone, for mother and baby. So, no.
I hope my brain doesn't recreate that when I'm dying.
A near-death experience is not like being born again.
Oh my gosh.
Which I guess kind of contradicts my earlier, like, I wonder if people who as they die, they're going to be born into some new thing. So I guess they go through, like, peace and then experience the trauma.
Yeah. I don't know. The last one is neuroanatomical, which is a theory that says damage to certain areas of the brain can lead to specific experiences that near-death experiencers claim to have. So, for example, damage to the bilateral occipital cortex can lead to visual experiences such as seeing tunnels of light, and damage to the unilateral or bilateral temporal lobe structures can lead to emotional experiences such as memory flashbacks or life reviews.
So would this be like temporary damage then? Because if it's like a permanent damage, wouldn't they continue to see these lights or experience these emotions willy-nilly? And also, is that not something that you'd be, if there was a damaged portion of the brain, was that not something you'd be able to see on an MRI or
that's what
some
I
sort
thought.
of scan?
The criticism of it is that there's not enough research or data to like make this anything other than speculative. My question is, if all of this is happening when you're essentially brain dead, then how is portions of your brain being stimulated causing it? Like, I understand that you can stimulate portions of the brain and cause visual hallucinations,
right,
or auditory. Like, I get that parts of your brain can cause crazy things to happen, but if your brain is not working then nothing in your brain, then take the brain off the table. Then your brain's not doing anything. We're talking about a different, like, the thing that I think is crazy, that I think everyone is having a hard time, when I say everyone, I mean, like, scientists, is, like, I don't think we're talking, Jared, get the timer. The timer's going off. Anyways. Is like, we're not talking necessarily about the brain, we're talking about the consciousness separate from the brain.
Right.
It's like your consciousness is living on outside of your brain.
Hence why there's the discussion of like your soul kind of a thing. Because your brain is just another organ. Mm-hmm. But is that where, I know that's where, like, I think we've anyway. Yeah. And then there's the kind of that argument about, like, oh, it's just your brain rationalizing what, and comforting, because your brain does protect you a lot. Like, it blocks out certain memories or pieces or parts of, traumatic events or experiences or whatever. It protects you. Yeah. In a lot of ways, and it'll help you, you might see something, and then when you go back to remember it, you remember it differently than what it actually was. Yeah. Because your brain is trying to protect you or rationalize, or like, oh, no, it was this. And here's the obvious explanation for what you actually saw, when really what you saw was all kinds of messed up. Yeah. So if your brain is offline, how is it coming up with some sort of rationalization or experience or whatever to protect you from the trauma of being separated from life? Yes. Yeah. Like, if you're dead, how is your brain doing the things? So, again, that's a point in the soul column.
All right, are you ready for a couple examples?
Bring it.
Okay. So the first one is from 1988. It's a man named Ed Sullivan. Not Ed Sullivan. That's a completely different person. I'm sorry.
Like,
I'm looking.
You're looking. I was like, I'm looking past. Up there.
I was actually looking past you into the void, not at our boys. That was me just being like, that's a dumb thing to say. Al Sullivan is this man's name. He was 56, and he was having an emergency coronary bypass surgery at Hartford Hospital in Connecticut.
Hartford. Yes. Because heart surgery.
Because hearts. So he's having this heart surgery, and he suddenly found himself traveling upward and in a, quote, very thick, black, billowy, smoke-like atmosphere. And then he continued on into an amphitheater-like place, but there was a wall blocking the entrance. Mm-hmm. And he was like, WTF, I want to see over the wall. As he's trying to look over the wall, he notices 3 figures to his left, and he doesn't really, like, pay attention to them because he's like, I want to see over the wall. So he looks over the wall, and he sees himself lying on a table with light blue sheets. His chest is cut open, held open with metal clamps, and he could see his heart, like, inside of his chest. And he saw the surgeon, like, in the room, like, standing over him. And he said the surgeon was flapping his elbows like wings. And he's like, I don't know what the fuck he is doing. That is weird. Like a chicken, right? Okay. And he said there were 2 other surgeons working on his legs. And he's like, why are you working my legs?
My heart is
open. He's like, the surgeon's doing the chicken dance. Other people are working my legs. Like, no wonder I'm dying. Like, what in the hell is happening? So then he looks at the figures on his left, and he notices that one of them is his brother-in-law, who had died 2 years ago. And then, at that point, he notices a brightly lit tunnel to the right. He says he felt, quote, warmth, joy, and peace, and a feeling of being loved, I guess, emanating from the tunnel. And then he saw, which this sounded scary at first, but don't worry, it calms down. He saw a brown cloaked figure coming from the tunnel. Doesn't that sound scary? Mm-hmm. Okay, don't worry, it was his mom. But, like, don't come at me in a brown cloak. That sounds like...
You mean like that brown cloak hanging on the wall?
Yes, that... I'm sorry. But, yeah, like, brown cloaked figure. Ugh. But don't worry, it was his mom. And she had died when he was 7, and she was 37. And he, like, even remarked that she looked, I guess, the same age. Like, he was like, oh, she looked so young. And she was, like, mouthing words at him, and he couldn't understand her, but they communicated telepathically somehow. And then at some point, she looked concerned, and then she went down to the surgeon, the chicken surgeon, and she placed his hand on the left side of Al's heart. She was like, you're doing this wrong. Other side of the heart.
Flap your wing on this side.
And the surgeon, like, waved his hand around in the air like he was swatting at a fly. Mm-hmm. So, like, I assume he felt a presence in the room and was like, get out of here. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, his mother returned through the tunnel, and Al returned to his body. And when he woke up, he immediately told his surgeon, who, by the way, his surgeon's name was Dr. La Salsa, which...
I love it.
I know.
It's a great name.
I know. So he's like, Dr. La Salsa, let me tell you what just happened.
Why were you doing the chicken dance in the OR?
So he tells
Why were they messing with my legs?
Right, so he tells Dr. La Salsa about it, and he's like, you just had a reaction to the drugs. But he, like, keeps telling him about it. He's like, and you were, like, flapping your arms around it. And he's like, wait, what did you say? How did you know that? So apparently Dr. La Salsa had a habit of, when he would go into surgery, when he was, like, okay, so one version said, like, before he had scrubbed in, but then another version said, like, he had scrubbed in, but before he actually, like, he didn't want to touch anything until he was actually ready to, like, put his hands...
Touch the things.
Touch the heart. Mm-hmm. He would put his hands on his chest and point at things with his elbows. So, like, if he was telling, like, a nurse to get something, he'd be like, go over there and get that thing, or get that thing over there. Yeah. And so that's what he was doing. Like, and he would...
Instead of talking with his hands and accidentally...
he would just put his hands on his chest and just point with his elbows. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I would do that. Like, that was just a habit of mine. But, like, I have no idea how this guy knew that I was doing that. Yeah. And he was also able to confirm that they had been stripping a vein out of Al's leg to create a bypass graft for his heart. Hence why they were working on his legs.
Gotcha.
So... at least they weren't, like, fucking up his legs or whatever. So that's that story with
the chicken dance.
The chicken dance and the legs. The next story is 2 years later, 1991. And this is Pam Reynolds, who is 35. She's a singer-songwriter that I've never heard of, sorry. And She was diagnosed with a large brain aneurysm, and this required an extremely risky surgery, which sounds made up, but I'm going to tell you about it. It involved putting her into, quote, a cardiac standstill. That also required lowering her body temperature to 60 degrees and then draining the blood from her head. And you're nodding your head like you know. Is this a thing?
I mean, obviously it is. But no, some of these things sound familiar for some of those, like I think I can see some of the logic behind of things, because, you know, an aneurysm is a bleed in your brain.
Right.
And it puts too much pressure on your brain and, like, literally kind of, I think, suffocates it, basically. And also you essentially bleed out.
Yeah.
So by lowering her body temperature, they're kind of putting on ice, kind of like preserving. And then draining the blood from the brain to relieve the pressure. So keep going. Well, I mean, I'm basically, it's like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. Surgeon. But what I know of, like, the medical world and from, you know, medical shows that I've watched and what I know of the body, I'm with you, basically. That's why I'm nodding. I'm like, okay, I'm with you. I think I see why they're doing these things.
I just have a question. Well, I have many questions. One of which is, I always have heard that, like, if your brain doesn't get oxygen for a certain amount of time, like, you suffer brain damage. How are we depriving your head/brain of blood for this amount of time and then just bringing you back to life?
Well, the blood is how you get the oxygen to the brain.
Yeah, but we're draining your head
of blood. But there's still a lot of it in there, and I think that also is related to the lowering of the body temperature.
Okay. I don't know, it sounds like so sci-fi to me. I don't know. Also, I just cannot... All I kept picturing is, like, what if someone walked into that OR just, like, accidentally and just saw this woman's, I imagine, blue-gray head because it's cold and also drained of blood and now cut open because... Anyways. Okay, so they've done this to her.
Well, they've probably also...
I'm sure locked the doors to the OR, but...
Well, I'm thinking of... I'm sure there's a blood transfusion, too. And so I think they're, like, probably... Because they've essentially medically stopped her heart, too. So there's nothing else pumping blood anywhere in the body. And I think that, again, kind of goes back to cooling the body temperature to basically refrigerate her.
Yeah.
To preserve her.
I just cannot...
Until they can resume active blood flow. And then there's going to be a blood transfusion. So basically, as soon as they've repaired the blood vessel that has... I guess, ruptured to create, cause the aneurysm or whatever. Once they've repaired that, basically plugged the leak, they're going to have new, fresh blood coming in a blood transfusion.
Okay. And
pump it that way.
I just cannot, my brain can't understand how you can stop someone's heart and just, like, willingly stop their heart for, like, enough time to do surgery and then just start it back up and be like...
It's probably pretty fast, too.
Yeah, still. I don't know.
I don't know.
So they did that. They do all this fancy stuff that they don't swear it's safe. I'm sure she signed a bunch of stuff, but, like...
She had an aneurysm. I doubt she signed anything.
True. And also they did...
She was conscious.
They did say this was, like, extremely risky.
Yeah.
The first...
So is an aneurysm. Like, well, yeah. I think at that point it's like, we could do this and she might die, or we could do nothing and she's definitely gonna die.
Well, I think it was like, we could do nothing and you're gonna die. We could do a regular surgery and you're also gonna die, or we could try this and you might live.
Yeah.
Like, I think they said, like, regular surgery, you have no chance of surviving. We can try this surgery and you might live.
Yeah.
Or the aneurysm will just kill you.
Yeah. I had a teacher in high school who had an aneurysm, and I don't know if he had a near-death experience. I doubt it, because...
He didn't come back a better person?
He didn't come back right.
Oh.
Somebody would, like, make a joke, and he would laugh and be like, oh, yeah, and then he'd, like, slam his yardstick against the wall and be like, no, it's not that. We're like, it was just a joke. Jeez. We were just having a good time here. And so he would just turn on a dime.
He had, like, a railroad spike in the head kind of situation. Yeah. Yikes. Okay, so Pam is having the surgery done. And during the surgery, she finds herself awake. And as she describes it, popping up out of the top of her head. And then, like, up in the top of her room, looking down. She saw 20 people around the operating table.
Yeah, I imagine it's probably a big production.
Big production, yeah. She could see the surgeon was using a small bone saw to cut into her skull. She said it looked like an electrical toothbrush. She described the different drill bits, I guess were sitting like on a table. And she said the case for it looked like her dad's socket wrench set. She heard a woman say, quote, her arteries are too small. She'd be like, please don't say things like that. And can you say something more encouraging? Like, wow, her arteries look great.
That's not helpful.
Not helpful. Say something helpful, Pam.
No.
I mean, wait.
No. The nurse, her saying the arteries are too small is helpful. Because then the doctors are like, that's a problem. We need to figure out how to deal with that problem. As opposed to, you're doing great, sweetie.
Yeah,
that is not helpful.
That's not helpful. You're right.
Helpful maybe to the patient, but she can't hear you as far as you know. So say it.
That's true. So then at some point Pam saw
It's not like she said, Pam, your boobs are too small, because that's really not helpful to anyone. That's definitely not helpful to Pam. And it's definitely not helpful to the surgeons. They don't care. They're working on her brain, not her boobs.
So at some point Pam saw a tunnel and a bright light. At some point she talks to her grandmother and her uncle, who are both deceased. And eventually both of them escort her back to her body. She does not give details about like all the other fun things she gets to do. But when she gets back to her body, she says like her body looks like shit and she does not want to go back. She says Hotel California by the Eagles is playing in the operating room. And again, she's like, my body looks like shit. I do not want to go back. But they're like, you have to. And she said her uncle physically pushed her back in her body. And she was really upset about it.
Well, yeah, you look a little wrecked. You just had a very traumatic surgery.
But she said the sensation of going back into her body felt like jumping into cold water.
Yeah, her body was refrigerated. Her body was 60 degrees.
So after her surgery, she doesn't mention what happened until like a year later when she told her neurosurgeon, whose name is Dr. Spetzler. And her account of what she told him matched what he remembered of the surgery. And then at some point, Dr. Sabum, who is one of our little trio with Dr. Grayson, he hears about Pam's story and he's like, I'm going to investigate this. So he gets a hold of Pam's medical records and looks into her surgery. So there were 20 people in the room. There was a conversation about the veins or arteries in her leg. Hotel California was playing. I don't know why that's in her medical record, but I guess they put what songs they played. And then the bone saw that they used does look like a little electrical toothbrush, but with like a little circular saw in the end. So Dr. Sabum's like, cool.
Yeah, your account matches.
He's like, I'm putting this in my study. Meanwhile, anesthesiologist Gerald Worley, I don't know what the this guy's deal is and why he's like weighing in on this, but Gerald is like, no, this is not a thing. Pam was experiencing anesthesia awareness. According to Gerald, first of all, Gerald said that he thinks anesthesia awareness happened to 1 in 2,000 cases in 1991, which seems like a lot.
That is a lot. When you think, I mean,
a lot.
There were 5 other people that were scheduled for surgery just at like the 7 a.m. slot with Shelton. So that's a lot of surgeries. And, you know, some of them...
I don't like those odds.
The nurse was like, oh, you know, most procedures will last, you know, the group here, you know, all these procedures that you're in for range from 30 minutes to, you know, one was like 4 or 5 hours. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's 5 people for the 7 a.m. slot. When I got back at 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever, And I was in the waiting room with other loved ones and other patients that were waiting to be taken back for surgery. I'm like, there's a lot of new faces in here, which means there's a lot of more people who are getting surgery right now. So if you think about the number of people who are having surgery in a given day at even one hospital, and then multiply the number of hospitals there, like 1 in 2,000.
I don't like this odds.
That's like 1 per hospital per day.
I know. That's like I feel like I would need to ask, like, has someone had
there's not 2,000 surgeries in a hospital in a day, but still.
I feel like I would need to ask, like, has someone this week had anesthesia awareness? No? Cool. I'm not having my surgery this week.
I don't want to be that one.
I ain't gonna be the one. So Gerald theorized that Pam was, quote, jolted into consciousness when her skull was cut open. But Gerald, her head was drained of blood and her heart had stopped. So how was she brought into consciousness? And also, isn't that like your whole job to make sure
that it doesn't happen?
She wasn't just like taking a little nap and you just like, hey,
looky here.
Hey, like, jolted into consciousness. You have extremely heavy drugs, and also I assume you went to school for a very long time in order to make sure that a bone saw to the brain, to the skull, doesn't...
Going in to, going under and then coming back out, it's a slow, groggy process for both. It's like... I vaguely remember, I remember being wheeled to the OR, and then everything's real fuzzy because I couldn't open my eyes, but I could still hear and whatnot, and I could remember, I was slowly becoming, all cotton-headed, whatever, and I remember slowly waking up and slowly coming back to consciousness. Yeah. There was no jolting.
Yeah.
There's no jolt.
It seems like you're doing a really poor job. Okay. So he also theorized, which, did I forget to put this part in here? Oh, get out of here. Oh, I did forget to say, for the surgery, her eyes had been taped shut. Mm-hmm. And also she had earphones that were playing a loud clicking sound. And this was so that they could measure her brainstem activity while she was unconscious to know when they could drain the blood from her head.
So how could she hear Hotel California over the clicking?
Exactly. Well, according to Gerald, he said...
And the bzzz of the bone saw.
Yes. He said that he thought that either the earphones weren't fitted tightly enough or that sound was being transmitted through the operating room table. And he thought that because they were like, well, what about the bone saw? She knew what that looked like. How does she know that? He said, oh, she probably heard the bone saw. It sounded like a dental drill. And she, knew what that looked like from having seen a dental drill at some point and just, pictured what that looked like in her head. I don't fucking know why Gerald has a bone to pick in this.
Why is he weighing in on this?
I don't know was he the
was he the anesthesiologist on this surgery?
I don't know, but Dr. Spetzler doesn't have a problem with her being I had a near-death experience. He's okay, cool.
Why do we want to argue with people when they said they had a near-death experience?
No.
They're probably not saying it to be cool.
No. Let her live her life. All right, I have one more thing to tell you about. All right. So, near-death experiences, right? They're great. They're bringing us a lot of comfort. I forgot to tell you, some of them are not great. There's something called distressing near-death experiences. These are less likely to be reported, and therefore it's hard to know how often they occur. In the Ologies episode, they really glossed over this. They were like, oh yeah, these near-death experiences, everyone's reporting, unconditional love and peace and warmth, and like most of them,
there's a few that have a bad time, but
a really small margin have like a negative experience. But like most of them are great. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Huh? Say that again, Dr. Grayson? Huh? What? Okay, so one study estimates 1 in 5, which again, I don't love that number.
Yeah,
that's not a great one. But again, it's hard to know because people are not really reporting negative ones.
If they had a bad time, I doubt they really want to talk about it and relive that experience.
They don't. There are 3 kinds of distressing NDEs: inverse, void, and hellish. I'm going to tell you what each of those mean. Inverse.
I can guess at least one of them, maybe 2.
Inverse is interesting because this is just essentially characteristics or features of like a pleasant near-death experience.
But the opposite?
No, they're just interpreted as negative. Oh. So, seeing your lifeless body or flying up through space is like panic-inducing instead of like pleasant. Or like realizing that you're dead or dying makes you like sad.
No, come back.
Yeah, essentially that. Like, I think there is part of it missing, like that peaceful, loving part is missing. And like probably you're not experiencing the whole thing because you're not getting to that point of like, you know, peace and love and tranquility. But like you are experiencing some of the same parts, but instead of feeling peaceful and like happy, you're like freaking the fuck out and having an anxiety attack about it. Void is scenarios of aloneness, isolation, emptiness, and sometimes annihilation. Examples. I'm so sorry. There's going to be examples of these because the paper I read just gave me examples with no context. So a woman who unfortunately experienced complications during childbirth. I don't know why there were so many of these. She found herself flying over the hospital into deep space. I don't know if that means deep outer space or just deep space. And then some entities joined her and said, "You never existed." And she's like, "What? Yes, I did." And they're like, "Nope, you never existed. Your entire life was a joke. And you were you were allowed to imagine it, but nothing has ever been real." And then they left her alone to just exist in space by herself. Another woman who, which I should probably have given a little content warning before this. This is the part where it might get a little existential. And if you don't want to listen to this, feel free to not listen to this part. Another woman who attempted suicide. She said that she felt like she was drawn into a dark abyss or tunnel. And she felt terrified, and she was expecting or hoping for nothingness, which, like, this part really got me, like, expecting that. She was like, I was expecting the big sleep, essentially. Yeah. Like, I was expecting nothingness, but essentially what she was feeling was, like, an eternity of, like, consciousness, but, like, in another place. And then a man who was attacked by a hitchhiker, which I really need more context for, found himself floating in total blackness. He said he felt like he was left there for an eternity and he was only allowed to think and reflect. So those seem terrible. And then the last kind is hellish, which thankfully this is the least common. Although I don't know if that just means it's the least commonly reported because it's the worst kind. And this one's like kind of self-explanatory. It's just like hellish imagery.
Instead of going up, you go down. Instead of warmth and light, it is dark and cold and scary. And instead of the feeling of love,
it's the opposite of all those things. So one woman described being escorted through a desolate landscape and seeing wandering souls that seemed to be in pain, but she was told that she couldn't help them. A university professor who suffered an intestinal rupture. I know. He experienced, quote, being maliciously pinched and then torn apart by malevolent beings. Another person witnessed, quote, horrific beings with gray, gelatinous appendages that made, quote, guttural moanings. And then someone else experienced sliding downward into a cold, dark, watery place and seeing the entrance to a cave, hearing screams, moaning, and wailing, and seeing grotesque human-like beings. Distressing near-death experiences include a lot of the same, like, quote, evidence as pleasant near-death experiences. So a heightened sense of awareness, out-of-body observances that can be, like, verified later, etc. So, for example, there's a woman who was involved in a car accident, and she suddenly found herself looking at the wreckage and at herself. And then she saw a woman take her children out of the car, I guess they were unharmed, and took them to sit in a car, like sit in her car to wait for the ambulance. And like the woman who's, our perspective, this woman is like obviously stuck in the car. And then Jesus shows up, but
cool.
Stereotypical Jesus. She said he looked
white
like
Jesus.
Yeah, it was like white Jesus. She said he looked like he did in all the paintings. So like, I'm skeptical.
White Jesus with a tan.
White Jesus, yeah. And he leads her around a well. I don't know why there's a well, but on one side of the well is, quote, bliss, and on the other side is evil. And white Jesus makes her look at the evil side for some reason. And on the evil side were people chained up who were emaciated and like in pain. And then white Jesus made her walk through the evil side by herself. And she said that she knew if she chose to stay, she would be stuck in the evil side. And then she looked inside the well and she saw 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And they were calling her mommy and they were like begging her to come back to them. But she only had 2 boys and she didn't have a daughter, and her boys were a lot, like they were little and these were older, like the whatever. And then when white Jesus brought her back to the accident, she said she didn't want to go back, even though she had just had this experience where she knew if she stayed, she'd like
suffer.
Be in the bad place. But she did go back. And when she was conscious again, she immediately demanded to know where her kids were. And they were with this woman who had taken them out of the car, and they were sitting in her car waiting. And then she said several years later, she did have another child, which was a girl.
I was about to say, I'm like, did she find out later that she was pregnant at the time?
So, like, she had these, like, verifiable things. And, like, the same way that there are, like, after effects of positive or, like, pleasant near-death experiences, there's typically 3 responses to distressing near-death experiences. So the first one is, like, the turnaround. So this is seeing a near-death experience as, like, a warning or, like, a reason to change your life.
The Scrooge effect.
Yes. So a lot of these are, like, people who turn to religion. I don't know how I feel about these because, like, the stuff I read was, like, oh, I'm definitely not afraid anymore because I do 60 hours a week of, like, I go to Bible college now and I do 60 hours a week of serving Jesus and I definitely know where I'm going. And I'm like,
that's very self-serving. You're only doing that so that you end up in the good
well,
place.
yeah. And I'm like, okay, but I also spent like 25 years of my life believing that. And also, I was also secretly still terrified the entire time that I was going to end up in hell. So, like, that's not really, in my opinion, I don't know. I'm like, fear-based faith isn't, anyways. The other one is reductionism, which is what I wish that I had the ability to do, which is finding a rational explanation for it. This is just dismissing it as either a hallucination, a reaction to drugs, something just not real.
Let's not give it more attention than we need. It was a weird experience. Let's move on with our lives.
Yep. And then the last one is labeled the long haul. And this one is really upsetting to me because it's essentially not being able to deal with it or process it. A lot of people essentially just hold on to these memories for the rest of their lives.
dwell on them and
essentially they seem to me just be suffering from like PTSD,
post-traumatic stress.
A lot of them are in psychotherapy, but like it doesn't really help because therapists don't really believe that this experience happened to them, or like you know that it really happened to them,
right?
And they don't really find any comfort in religion necessarily. And then there's also not any evidence to suggest that there's like any rhyme or reason as to who experiences what. So like there's no evidence to suggest that good people
have good experiences
and bad people have bad experiences.
Just because this one mom had this hellish experience doesn't mean that she was a bad person or a bad mom.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know. I hate to end on like ones, but also I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, I hope, I don't know. When I listened to the episode, I was like, wow, I'm so comforted. I also don't want to be afraid of death, and like, I'm glad that dying by falling isn't painful. And
let's go back and focus on that.
Let's go talk about Albert Heim. And like, and then like, I don't know, that one little thing where he's like, oh, and then some of them aren't pleasant, but like, and I'm like, I gotta learn about that a little bit. So I don't know. I have to make it everyone's problem also, but that's near-death experiences.
Cool.
And I encourage everyone to
not die.
Take care of your heart. Eat some Cheerios. Go look at the look at the Wikipedia page and then look at all of the references. There's also 1 million books that people have written. Don't read the one by, I'll find it. There's a link in there. Everyone go to the show notes. The Esquire article, read that, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Don't read the book that guy wrote because he's a fucking idiot. You'll know if you read that article, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, anyways, that's it.
If you want to help Hannah keep up her New Year's resolution and go and keep an eye out for social media posts, check out our Facebook and Instagram at The Tales We Tell Podcast. If you want to see pictures from episodes, not today's, but others, you can check out our website, or you don't do the social media, go to our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. If you want to support us and get yourself some sweet, sweet swag, go to our Redbubble store. We've got several different logos, and you can put that on anything. And if you want to support us, but you don't need the stuff, except, I don't know, early access, commercial-free listening, sometimes some fun bonus content, stickers, love notes, etc., you can become a patron at patreon.com. Search The Tales We Tell. And until next week, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.